Hi, this is Kendra from Pencil and Pigment, and this is part 2 of me discussing chalk pastels. So, it would be remiss to me if I did not bring up probably the most expensive chalk pastel that money can buy, and that is the La Maison du Pastel, and this is in Paris, and it's Isabelle Rocher is the current owner and operator of this company. Now, when I say they are the most expensive, I see them, they're about anywhere from $8 US to $10 US for half stick, about this size, roughly. They are super expensive because the entire process is made by hand. So their milling machine was purchased in the 1940s, but other than that, their scales and everything they use are hundreds of years old. They tout their product as having the most amount of pigment to the least amount of binder out of all pastels for sale. Their binder is a top secret, and 100% of the process is done by hand. So they are handmade and hand rolled. These are just hand rolled, where the machine puts the pigment, the binder, the inert ingredients together, it shoots it out, and then somebody with gloves on with hands rolls these out into sticks. Now you can make your own soft pastel. I will link a page with recipes that show how to do that. You need powdered pigments. You need binders. So binders would be gums, glues, waxes, oils, like gum arabic, think wheat paste, wallpaper paste. I think beeswax would be really good to bring down dust if you added a little bit of that. The best one as a binder for making your own would probably be gum tragacanth, and that's not something I have on my shelf, and it's probably something you don't have on yours. So if you're doing a no-buy art supply, you're out of luck for making your own top quality pastels, but it would be the pigment, the binder, and then you have to add some sort of inert ingredient like marble dust or powdered quartz or silica, which is about maybe 2 to 3% of the ingredients within the recipe. So now these compare, I would say, to the Sennelier. If you're talking about the Rocher pastel in France, compared to these, I would say those, from everything I've read and everything I've seen compared, they are a hair bit scratchier. And I think it has to do with their inert ingredient. I think they add a little bit more marble dust. So, what's best is what's preference. If you are doing commissions, this is fine. Anything with pigment information and light fast information is perfectly fine for a commission, for a gift. You know what you're giving someone. You absolutely have to have some form of spray fixative. Please do not use hairspray. That yellows and wrecks the piece of art over time. Now, we should talk a little bit about paper. There is specially formulated pastel paper, and that can be sort of the Ingress drawing paper, pastel matte, sanded paper. So sanded paper is sort of a texturized paper where sand has been actually added to the surface, and it's a little bit more expensive per sheet, but the more texture you have within your piece of paper, the more layers and things you can build up. And that's ideal with pastels. You want to go in really, really light, add a ton of layers without muddying the color and being able to sort of move it around within the tooth and texture of the paper. So sanded papers would include Pastel Matte, Color Fix. UArt does probably one of my favorites, and it's very fascinating because you can purchase their paper by grit, and it's a lot like buying sandpaper. So 800 would be the finest, the tiniest texture, where their 240 would be the sort of largest, roughest texture. Now, these are just sort of parameters. Art is all about breaking the rules. You can do any smooth surface you want. Just know that you won't be able to do as many layers and it will muddy quicker, so go on really, really light. I often do commissions and gifts with watercolor paper that's cold pressed because of the texture. Now, some people don't care for watercolor paper as pastel paper simply because it's white. So you have to have something to do with sort of the white paper. And a lot of pastel artists prefer a colored page, a colored substrate that sort of handles the middle values, the middle tones. And then you can add highlights and dark shadows. So again, what's best is what's preference for you. Welcome to my world. For those of you doing a no-buy and you really want to make something by hand, I have a recipe for making your own chalk. That is tempera paint, water, and plaster of Paris. And if you're like, hey, I don't have plaster of Paris, I have a recipe for making your own. It's glue, flour, and water. So I will link all the things if you want to make all the things. Now, if you're wondering sort of where this sits on the spectrum of softness to firmness, again, look at your goals of what you want to achieve for your illustrations and ideas. If you really want to work on sort of landscapes and sunsets and you want really soft sweeping clouds across the sky where it just blends out, you want to work on ombre and blending, I would say go really soft with your pastel. Something like Schminke makes the softest pastel. If you want to work on detail, tiny miniatures, I would say get a very hard compressed rectangular pastel or pastel pencil. Maybe something like New Pastel or Create-A-Color. I feel like the Rembrandt, Winsor Newton, Caran d'Ache are sort of somewhere in the middle of ultra soft Schminke and super hard New Pastel. And these are on the softer side of those. Again, this is a very sweeping generalization because within these, some of these are more textured than others. But that's kind of where I land with all of this. I hope this helps. I hope this was interesting for you. The tips and sort of tricks for using these would be, I mean, how fine can you go? How light can you go? Again, this is just the Strathmore toned tan. There isn't any texture or tooth. This is just a plain, basic sort of paper. And if you're very strategic with it, you only need to have, you know, one layer without worrying too much about muddying or things like that. Go lighter because you can always add more. It's really hard to remove and take off when you're applying pressure. And again, something like a pencil to go in with tiny details later is always an option if you're doing a cloud, and these are my little tiny birds. But I hope this information was a help to you. It is really hard to say what is the best product, what is sort of the softest product, because I don't know what you want to achieve. I don't know what your interests lie. If you are already a pastel artist and you already have some of your favorites, and you notice that maybe you have gaps in some areas of color, like you don't have enough dark earth greens, I would say pick up a couple of these individually and try them out and see if you like this size format for the size you work in. The smoothness of the texture. Again, I would buy kind of a 3 just so you get a larger sample size of their performance. I do believe in 2023 I will be adding a few more colors to this collection. They may not be exactly this brand, but I do want to add a little bit because this for me is a very quick, if time constraints and working in minutia or fine detail or hyper realism isn't for you, this is great for impressionism, for sort of quicker creations. And if you only have 20 minutes, you can create something beautiful with these. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.